Well, welcome to a very special edition of Voices of the Valley, part of the podcast portion of Valley Hoops Insider, the website. I'm Harry Schroeder. Glad to be with you today. And today we got a very special guest, a Hall of Famer, an icon in our Missouri Valley Conference, and certainly at Southern Illinois University. The one and only Mike Reis will be with us in just a minute as we talk about the shocking news that he dropped on all of us, ruining our summer in the most recent days. And we'll talk to him about all of that. I want to bring Mike into the conversation now and see if I hit the button right. He should be coming. There he is. Mike Reis. Mike, really appreciate you joining us today. Before I let you say anything, you SIU grad, all those years, 44 years doing ball games, football, baseball, basketball, all the various sundry things you have done. Still on the job. I just listened to your interview with Brian Mullins about this upcoming basketball team. So many things that you've done. And before we talk about what you're about to do, just looking back, can you even in any way at all encapsulate all the stuff that you've been a part of?
Well, not unless you want to talk till midnight.
I got time.
Harry, there's, and I do too, especially in about 3 weeks. But I don't think it's, I think I can. I don't know what kind of justice I could do, but at 21 years old, I did the College World Series. I was still a student at that time. In 1978, 79, I got the job full time. There were still 4 stations doing the games at the time. Wasn't until about 3 or 4 years later that we got accidental exclusivity, and the others dropped out. 1983, did the national championship in 1AA football, and I was 27 years old then. The Rich Aaron run in the mid 90s, where they won 3 straight Missouri Valley Conference tournaments. The 2002 to 2007 run in basketball and 2002 to 2009 in football probably are stretches that won't ever be duplicated at Southern, because basketball has 2 Sweet 16s in there, and football has consecutive playoff runs from playoff teams from 2003 through 2009 through 2 coaches. And so, and all of, and everything that is part of the day-to-day in between, that's how I would encapsulate it. To be at this thing for as long as I've been at it, 44 years doing the games, and another 4 years I covered the team either as a student reporter or a reporter. So 48 being around this is really incredible, and I never thought it would get that far. For a while, I'm not sure I deserve to be there more than 48 minutes, let alone 48 years. But I can't. I'm very proud of what was accomplished and what I was allowed to accomplish too by the people who owned the rights.
You know that I have just great respect and affection for you and a couple of the broadcasters around the valley. I talked to Dave Snell recently about what you are doing, and talked to Luke Martin about what you're doing. And
there's a wide range. There's a wide range.
Well, I wanted to go younger and not younger, and just guys that revere you and love you. Dave was telling me he cried when you told him, and when did you start thinking about this? In your big letter that you wrote, I thought it was so thoughtful, so classy the way you did it. You said you noticed things about your broadcast maybe that didn't sit well with you. Right. When did you start thinking about this? And then how vociferously do I have to try to talk you out of it?
Well, 2000 right now, no. I mean, if I come back after all this in the last week and put up just kidding, I think I might as well quit. Really 2 years, Harry. I was going to quit after the 21-22 season. The passion was starting to lag, but what was driving that at that time was I was mad at the world. I was mad at myself. I was mad at Southern. I was mad at a lot of things relative to the Salukis and athletics and my work. I only told my brothers and Joel Sambursky of Liberty Wealth in Carbondale, who handles my money. And that's an important part too. And so I didn't want to leave angry. And so I changed my mind and only had to tell 3 people after the 22 season. But I said the same thing about 22-23. And when it got to the Valley Baseball Tournament and it was over, that was over. I was very happy. It was a fun season. And it was time to end. I felt I had lost the passion to do the games. Mm-hmm. And mostly I had lost the passion to do the day-to-day, Harry. When it got to game day, I felt strong. I felt I was doing okay. Could I do another year? Yes, I could do another year. But when the passion for the day-to-day starts to show up, it shows up in terms of your preparation. So now you start making small mistakes that I admit probably I'm the only one that notices them. And so I might say a particular stat was 9, but it was really 8. And as I was taught years ago and still believe that just because you're one off doesn't mean you're close. It means you're wrong. And that bothered me. And so now, Southern plays Valley basketball teams twice a year, and I've got all the players' names. I didn't get to the point where I was messing up SIU's games or players' names. But, when all of a sudden you're looking at the scorecard or you're looking at the monitor for a number a little bit more than you used to, I always said I would know before everybody else when I was done. And those are all the things that I kept in mind as I looked at all of this and thought, this is it. I use the word resigned rather than retired because if Southern wants me to fill in, if Southern has a conflict in the future and wants me to fill in, or if another school wants me to fill in, or a year from now I feel differently and want to do a full season for somebody, I didn't want to be held up by using the word retiring on May 31st. I don't like when people do that. I know we're not computers. We're all human beings, and I am too. And I tend to treat myself more like a computer than a human being. But I just don't like when people say they're going to quit and spend more time with their family, and they never ask their family if the family wanted them around more. And so then they come back. And God willing, I won't have to come back. I think I'm in good shape financially. I'm in good shape health-wise. There's nothing cynical here. Everybody wants to parse it, and that's why I said what I said, because I felt like I owed the listeners that, and that Southern wants me back. The contracts were either there or were coming. My health is fine. If I have an issue health-wise, I don't know about it yet. So there's nothing suspicious here. I don't have another job, and I feel really at peace with the decision. And while it's very intoxicating, all of the outpouring of comments and love, you can't help but be human and think, you know what, maybe I messed this up. But then once you get through all the responses, you realize this is the right thing to do. Because when I stopped and thought about everything that was involved to do the games next year, it just didn't excite me in the way it should.
When you look back, Mike, I know you've worked with a lot of different partners in the different sports, and the little bit, the amount of experience I've had doing games, around a lot of different places. I know those partners become very special, important. You're emotional about them. Tell us about some of the guys you've worked with and the people you've enjoyed laboring with.
Well, I've done them for 44 years, football and basketball, and I don't know how many years baseball. Harry, I'm too scared to count, but especially the individual games. But Greg Sterick is at the top of the list. Saluki Hall of Famer, who is one of the great players to ever play here. Local businessman, now an athletic director at John A. Logan College in Southern Illinois. He signed on. My first year was 78-79. He signed on in 79-80. And we did a bunch of full seasons. We probably did 36 full seasons and then a handful of partial seasons. And He even filled in on a couple games this season. He's at the top of the list, and it was interesting this year, Harry. We've done so many games together that even though he had only done a handful of games the previous 3 years, I mean, not even 10, he did 2 this year, and we jumped in like we hadn't missed a beat. And that's pretty special. And to the extreme that you're finishing people's sentences, you know when the other person can't, what the word he's striving for, and that's special. Plus, he taught me the game. When I came to school at Southern, the sports I liked the most were football and baseball, and I wasn't really in a basketball environment. But to survive at Southern, you better be able to do basketball. And he taught me the game, and they're lessons that have lasted, all of these decades. So he's at the top of the list. Gene Green is in a similar position with 24 years, I believe, in football color. A real rock of a guy who will stun you with his ability to remain calm when everything is collapsing around him, including the play-by-play guy. And so he did a heck of a job of keeping me grounded, and there were times I really needed that. Plus, provide good work too. There have been a bunch of people. Mike Trude has filled in on everything except that we've done, I can't be thankful enough for him. Plus, even in the sports that I didn't do, but administered with women's basketball and the like, he stepped up when that was necessary. Rodney Watson's made the arrival on the scene over the last 3 years that I thought he would. I knew that the only thing that could keep Rodney from being good in basketball was that the play would actually happen, and then he would have to be quiet when the time came. I knew he wouldn't be at a loss for words, and he really has picked up for Steric beautifully. And I've been so lucky with that, and I'm glad you brought them up, because they, along with the people who've owned the rights, the people that provide the resources, they have provided the resources that allowed us to hire those people. Good people aren't cheap, and you do get what you pay for. And I'm sure there were hometown discounts or university discounts because those guys like doing it, but not that much. They were paid, and I was paid, and that just means the world. So I think those are the ones at the top of the list.
You mentioned the Rich Herron era, and then the Bruce Weber / Matt Painter, Chris Lowry era. I'm a basketball guy. You had time with Barry, of course, and now with Brian. Can you compare, contrast? I mean, like, what was the Rich Herron era? Like, when I look back, I think of the way SIU was, and it was fine. And then Rich came along. It took him a year or two, but then all of a sudden they were terrific and really changed the whole trajectory of the program. And then that run in the 2000s with Bruce and the guys that followed. Compare those two different runs, how different they were, or maybe similar.
Well, the similarity ends with the NCAA tournaments, Harry. Weber coached him to the NCAAs in 2 and 3, and Painter did it in 4, and then Lowry from 5 to 7 with an NIT in 8, and to do it with 3 coaches every year from 02 through 07 with 3 different coaches. That means that the tree was pretty strong.
Or that Rodney Watson was really good.
Yeah, I think so.
I always gave him the credit.
I think so. He needs to be in SIU's Hall of Fame, by the way,
Yeah.
Rodney. And I think he will be before long. But the similarity ends at the NCAA tournament. Rich Herron, I think that Southern is still Division I because Herron's program succeeded. Because you're right. He was hired as a high school coach, and a legendary high school coach, not only in our area, but in this state, and won 1 million games. But it didn't happen right away. and there was serious pressure on him in '93 to do it, and he was able to achieve it. I think in 1990, well, in the mid '80s, I think the money was so tight at Southern that if his program eventually didn't go to the NIT in '89, I think it was, and then start putting together some NITs, consecutive NITs, I think that Southern would have dropped to Division II. No one has ever admitted that. There's a few people call me a fool for that, but I just know that the money was tighter then than it is now. And when that happens, I know what things are like now, and I thought it was worse then. And indeed, Southern dropped a couple of sports during that time, gymnastics and wrestling. So I think it was teetering in terms of being a Division I, and there was a lot of talk that Southern made a mistake going Division I, even though it had success in the late '70s when Paul Lambert was the coach. As for Weber, Weber modernized Southern's as a Division I institution. I don't think he ever comes here, and that whole run doesn't happen if Heron doesn't succeed. But I think Southern, Heron struggled after '95. And eventually there was a messy divorce between he and SIU. And Weber had to rescue some things, and he had to fight through some things. And then plus he was able to update the program and hired I mean, you look back at the staff, they all ended up being head coaches with Painter and Lowry, all those guys. So that's how I would separate those two.
When Barry was there, he was just always on the edge of trying to get over the hump, and it didn't really happen for him when he was there. But such a unique personality. But I thought that was a difficult time for Barry, though, because of that need to get over the hump that just couldn't happen.
Well, and the pressure was on him because he hadn't done it at Missouri State, and this place had. This place was unbelievably spoiled between '02 and '07. This place was so arrogant in 2008 that even the radio guy thought that, oh, we'll just step back to the NIT one time, and then we'll be right back. So we took a lot of things for granted. I think Southern was arrogant at that time, and that's why I'm kind of I'm on the lookout for that stuff. When mid-majors get a lot of success, it goes to their head quickly. And so Barry had fan grief at Missouri State for not going to the tournament, but they haven't been to the tournament.
Right.
No matter who's coached them since Spoon. And so now he comes to Southern. People are griping about not going. And certainly he was a very likable person. I think he was a better basketball coach than a lot of people at Southern gave him credit for. When Southern was beating his teams only at about a 500 clip, really, when he was at Missouri State, even though Southern was going to all those tournaments, they sure as heck weren't rolling Missouri State at the time. And so now you got the personal pressure, and I mean, he wore it on occasion. He really did. And the frustration would just come out. He never said, "Why can't I?" or "Why not me?" But I know he felt it.
When you look back over the 44 years, are there players that stand out? Are there guys that, man, I loved announcing that guy's games? Or obviously, I've listened to you so many times. You're such a pro, meaning like you're pulling for your team, but you're very fair, very honest, and you're praising the other team as well. But I know, as a guy that's done a lot of games, there's players I just love doing their games. I like the way they play. I like the way they do what they do. Are there players that stand out?
Well, Darren Brooks is the best all-around player that I've called here. 2-time player of the year. Could guard, could shoot, could score, could go get the ball. Sometimes Matt Painter said this one time after a game at Drake where he had like 8 steals or something like that. Said something like, "I'm glad Darren Brooks is on my team." And then he said he was the only guy worth the price of admission on both teams. And frequently that was the case. I mean, his arms stretched from Carbondale to St. Louis, and he could make plays. Mm. Hated in the worst way to redshirt that year. It was a young guy out of St. Louis, and when the coaches told him, they said, "You tell me who's better than me, and you put him right out there right now, and we'll go one-on-one, and I'll tell you where to put your red shirt." Kent Williams is the most influential basketball player I covered at Southern because he could score, his teams won, and he had an impact on attendance. Our fans like to think that local players make a difference in attendance. They don't. I've only seen one who's made a difference, and that was Kent from Mount Vernon, which is about an hour from Carbondale. I mean, those people bought tickets. The rest of the time when Southern's gotten area players, those players have created interest in the teams, but not necessarily tickets sold. Now, and back to Sterick for a second, I didn't broadcast his games, but all I have to do is look at the attendance numbers. And his teams, we're in that 19-win range, 17-win range, nothing special, nothing postseason. But the attendance was better than some other teams that had really good players. And so those are the only two times I've seen a local player matter in attendance. But Kent was the total package. Plus, he had the personality. And that's why I use the word most influential. There's other ways you could break it down. I can't break it down to just one person. Overall, the best shooter I've seen is Mike Glenn, and he was a 10-year NBA player who was a player when I was a student and a student reporter. And, and Frazier, who was before my time, is the most successful Saluki basketball player. But Glenn is in the conversation. He's in the top 5. That's the best shooter I have seen at SIU. Randall Falker is the best rebounder. The 02 team is my favorite team because it was the first Sweet 16 team. Probably the 07 team was better than the 02 team, but I think you always side with your first. And to me, that's the biggest thing that I've done. There's a College World Series in there. There's a national championship in football. But 02 was the first time that Southern was on a national stage when I was around it. And that was awful special, including just the games themselves at the United Center in 02.